Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 897B, and today's date is February 18th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Turkey Trying to Use NATO's Article 5 to Legalize War with Syria. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I just placed an interview with Harley Schlanger. It is on the YouTube channel X22 Report Spotlight. You can go right over to that channel and take a look, or you can come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, you can see it on the right-hand side, or you can go to newssentinel.com. That is the site where I'm streaming in alternative media. All you have to do is scroll down a little bit, look over to your right, you'll see the video there. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, yesterday we talked about the court order that came down that said iPhone has to cooperate with the FBI to hack into the San Bernardino shooter's phone. We know this was a complete false flag. We know what the FBI is trying to do here. They're trying to convince everyone, see this heavy encryption, we can't break into it, we can't stop terrorists, and they're basically pushing an agenda. But something very interesting right now is that John McAfee, he is out there and he's completely against Apple, who's being forced to help the FBI hack into the phone, because this will allow the FBI to figure out the encryption and they'll eventually create a backdoor. And John McAfee, he is offering to decrypt the San Bernardino's iPhone for them. And we can see right now that no matter how you look at this, if the government succeeds in getting this backdoor, it will eventually get a backdoor into every single type of encryption around the world. And everything as we know it right now, the privacy and everything we have, is completely over if we allow the government and we give in. And this is coming from John McAfee. And I agree with him. We have the rights that were laid out by the Founding Fathers, and every single person has the right to privacy. If you want to let the government in to walk through your house, look through your safe, look through your belongings, well, that's your choice. If you choose to say, no, go get a warrant, that is your choice also. When the government forces you to do something without allowing you to choose, you've lost your right. You don't have the right to choose anymore. The government is dictating what you will do. And right now, as it stands, we still have the right, even though some people don't believe so, we still have the right to choose. We can always fall back on the Bill of Rights. And if enough people fall back on the Bill of Rights and say, absolutely not, the world will be looking and the government will have to back down eventually. Now, I'm not talking about 1,000 people. I'm not talking about 10,000 people. I'm talking about millions of people. Yes, everyone is going to have to stand up for their rights. They're going to have to show the government, these are the rights, this is the contract you sign to be in government, to support the people. This is what they signed up for. They signed up to serve the people, not their own interests, not a foreign government, not a central bank, not a corporation. But you see what they're trying to do. And we know why they're doing this, because we see every single country doing this. They're using terror. They're using fear tactics to convince us to give up our rights. Look what's happening in France. This is the test bed. Look what we can do there. We can scare the people silly, and we can have a state of an emergency where all power goes to the president. Well, this is what they want to do in every country. Look what's happening in Hungary. Now, this is very interesting. And we're looking at the refugee crisis, and they're definitely playing this up. Now, a lot of people think, well, they released the refugees because of the war that's happening in Syria. They're all Syrian. Well, no, that's not true. Remember, the U.S. went into Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, and created this refugee problem to replace the government with a puppet government so they can implement a central bank and sell the natural resources using the dollar to keep the petrodollar alive. So they destroyed people's lives to do this. And then what was happening is, throughout all this time, Turkey, with an agreement with the United States, was harboring all these refugees in one area inside Turkey. And when the time was right, they released them into Europe. Why? Because they wanted Europe to get involved. They wanted Europe to get pissed off, to get involved in this war in Syria, pushing them. And we know there's many different agendas. We see the Schengen is completely destroyed. We see many countries are taking control of their own borders. And then I started to think, there's another agenda associated with this. If you notice in the corporate media, a lot of the alternative media, they're saying refugees are committing crimes, rapes, and everything else. Now, is this to allow the governments, the central banks, to prepare for civil unrest? This is the reason why we need armed troops on the ground. This is the reason why we need to purchase weapons and ammunition, because we're starting to see this now. Hungarian Prime Minister says the refugee crisis is worsening. And the central bank is stockpiling guns and ammo. The National Bank of Hungary bought 200,000 rounds of live ammunition and 112 handguns for its security company. Why would the central bank need security like this? Because what they're really getting prepared for is civil unrest in each one of these countries. Because as the system falls apart, people are going to be very upset. They're going to riot. They're going to be pissed off. They're going to go after the bankers, the government. And they know this. And the excuse they're using is that we need to do this and we're going to amass more of this because of international security risks. The situation right now has just reached the next level. We see out in Afghanistan, the UN is contradicting Obama, saying, no, Americans in Afghanistan, they're in direct combat situations right now. They're not there for advisors. They are fighting on the ground. And we see this in Iraq. We see this in Syria. And basically what's happening is the American forces right now, they're really not advisors. They're fully combat ready, and they're in the fight. If the authorization for war was passed right now, we would see a huge number of troops being shipped over to Iraq, to Syria, to Libya, to Lebanon, to Yemen, to everywhere else. Because remember, the authorization for war says wherever the Islamic State is, guess what? That's where the United States government can send troops. And everything they tried to do to pass this has failed. They can't get any traction on it whatsoever. Now, Turkey, they're taking the next step. We know that Turkey is part of NATO. They would love to invoke Article 5, but remember, this is a defense mechanism. It's not where they use it to go attack people. If they are attacked on their land, they can invoke Article 5. So we saw the explosion in Turkey, and of course it came out that, yes, it was the Kurds. They're the ones who are attacking us. Did they have any evidence? No, not really. Nothing that they can show. And the YPG is saying this is absolutely nonsense. We have not fired into Turkey. We did not bomb Turkey whatsoever. If we did, we would admit it, but we didn't do it. Basically, the YPG leader said, I can assure you that not even one bullet has been fired into Turkey. But this is what Turkey wants. Remember, they need to have an attack on their land to invoke, so they can invoke Article 5. So we can see right now that this is what they're trying to. Now, Erdogan is out there, and he is saying, listen, Syria was involved in this. The person who did it was a Syrian national. And this is why we need to go into Syria. And if no one believes me, well, this is your problem because I'm telling the truth. This is pretty much what he's saying. Even if you deny this, it's still true. So now they're saying that they found fingerprints. And I'm waiting to see if they find the passport, because that's what they usually find. But fingerprints they found, and they already searched and they found the guy who is a Syrian national, part of the Kurds. And they're already saying, yes, we have our man. That was very, very fast. And normally, when they come up with this information so fast, guess what? It's a complete false flag. Because how can you have an investigation so quickly and find that information? It's exactly what they wanted. This is a false flag. So now Turkey has summoned the UN Security Council members of Russia, China, the United States, United Kingdom, and France, and they're trying to plead their case. And we see 2 hours after this happened, Turkey went into Iraq and started air operations and started to bomb the Kurds in northern Iraq. And we know this is not who they're bombing. They're trying to protect their assets. That's all they're doing, and trying to push a war. Now, Turkey is continually shelling. They have not stopped. And they're creating this corridor to supply the Islamic State militants with weapons, with more troops. And we see that Turkish forces, they have escorted at least 2,000 militants back into Syria over the last week in covert operations. And they're trying to reverse the losses that are occurring due to the Russian bombing, the Syrians fighting the Islamic State. And they're also bringing in light weapons, heavy equipment, mortars, missiles, and everything else they possibly can get their hands on to help supply these troops. They don't want this to end. They want Assad out. This is their main goal. And if they have to start World War III, it looks like we're heading down this path. We know that Turkey most likely is going to plan another major provocation to invade Syria. Remember, these false flags are going to continually happen because they need to convince the world that they're being attacked. And we can see this is part of the U.S.'s plan. We're sitting here talking about peace with Russia. We're all in it for the ceasefire. Turkey's out there shelling into Syria, trying to keep the corridor open because this is the instructions the United States gave. Meanwhile, the U.S. is saying, we have nothing to do with this. We just want Russia to stop bombing the Islamic State. But Turkey can continue what they're doing. And the U.S. is sitting back and waiting because they know eventually what's going to happen is that they're going to use an event to convince the world they need to go into Syria and say the peace talks, the ceasefire, it's completely done. We don't need this right now. Turkey was attacked. The U.S. was attacked. Europe was attacked. However they're going to do this, they're going to use this. And remember, all the NATO countries then will go into Syria. Now, the United States, the U.S. defense officials, they are asking Russia right now to avoid airstrikes in an area of northern Syria where American Special Operation Forces are. Now, they didn't give them the exact locations. They just said wherever they are in this area right here, this broad area, don't bomb here. I mean, our airport that we're extending, this area, and we could see what's happening. Now, if Russia does bomb an area where there are special units there from the United States, this is going to pose a problem. And the U.S. could move these special operation forces anywhere. Now, if the U.S. was truly fighting the Islamic State, they would coordinate from the beginning with Russia. so they would both fight the same enemy. Russia has asked many, many times. And remember, Russia has been invited into the country by the sovereign government, the elected government, into the sovereign nation. The U.S. invaded. Syria doesn't want them there. Syria never invited them. They just decided, we will go. So this is very interesting. This is something we need to watch. We see Moscow right now. They are against a no-fly zone over Syria, saying this is not going to help. The Islamic State, they don't have aircraft. What would be the point of this? And of course, we know that Turkey wants it. They want to create a safe zone, a no-fly zone over this area, so they can keep the troops right there and carve out a peace. The U.S. is objecting to this to make it look good, and eventually what they're going to say is, yes, I think we do need this. And we can see they're planning on doing it. They haven't stopped the idea of having the safe zone, no-fly zone. And we see right now that as things progress, these false flags are going to get worse and worse. And the United States is going to demonize Russia as time goes on. The U.S. command has told journalists at the Pentagon that the brutal dictatorship is to blame for the human suffering in Syria. All the barrel bombs and the poison gas and everything else, he's to blame for all of this. And since the Russian operation, it has caused further tremendous damage. Of course, they've given no proof whatsoever, and we know all of this happened way before Russia got there, because the U.S. was in there for a year plus bombing and trying to help the situation, but the Islamic State, the proxy army for the United States government central bankers, they expanded their territory over that year. And now, where Russia is definitely fighting the Islamic State, they're losing the territory. And this is what's making the United States government central bankers very, very worried about. So, we see the U.S., they're trying to demonize Russia, saying they're hitting hospitals, they're hitting schools, they're killing civilians. And we see the stooges at the U.S. government, they're out there telling everyone about this, and questions are being asked, was it an aircraft, was it a missile? We have no clue. Well, how do you know it was them then? Because we know it was one of those things. We just don't know which one. Now, what's very interesting about all of this is that Russia, just like they did with Turkey with the oil convoys, they've come back and said, listen, if you want to pursue this, just know one thing. We have satellite imagery showing the planes taking off in Turkey, flying to the hospital and hitting the hospital. If you want to go down this road, we will show the proof, just like they showed the proof of Erdogan handling the oil convoys from the Islamic State. And right now, the U.S. has no comment on this, because Russia, as we can see from the past, will show the proof. And then once they show the proof, the whole thing falls apart. And we can see at this point that as time goes on, it's getting harder and harder for the United States to prove that Russia is doing these things. I mean, if they're going to prove something, at least have some facts. At least show some satellite imagery that they did this, because we know the satellites are right above. I mean, we have forces inside Syria, and we're not monitoring everything that goes on inside Syria. And the satellites are fully capable of full-color HD close-up shots. It's amazing when they wanted to show the Russian planes in Damascus on the runway, how clear, how colorful, how 3D those images were. So the satellites are right there. And if they were going to show proof, they would have done it already. This reminds me of Ukraine all over again. Now, we know the U.S., with the various agencies, they're going to be preparing for a false flag event. Now, where this is going to be exactly, we don't know. What they're going to do, well, we can try to figure out what they're going to try to do. I mean, this could be another 9/11, which I don't think they're going to try again. That'd be ridiculous. They've already done it. I think what they're going to do is they're going to try to hit multiple cities all at once. This could be in Europe, could be here in the U.S., could be in the Middle East, could be all at the same time, because they'll just go for it and say, okay, we need to start this war. And we see already that radioactive material in Iraq was stolen, some iridium-192. It was stored in a protective case the size of a laptop, went missing in November from a storage facility. And as we know, the false flag event could consist of chemical weapons, a dirty bomb. We know Israel has been testing dirty nuke bombs in the desert, multiple ones, to see how effective they are. I think it's more of a scare tactic than anything else. They can use biological and then follow that up with a cyber attack. And we see right now that Turkey is using false flags to push the war forward. We'll probably see a lot more of these little ones. And if they can't get any traction with this, they're going to move to the next level, and then to the next level, and then to the next level, until they use the big event to pull everything together and say, we need to go to war. Because if the U.S. doesn't do this at this point, what happens? They lose Syria. They're going to lose the Middle East. The petrodollar will basically completely collapse and fall apart. Countries will not need to keep the dollar in reserves. What's the point? They don't need it right now to pay for the oil. They'll use yuan, they'll use ruble, they'll use gold, silver, anything else. That means the dollar will start collapsing and will start devaluing very, very quickly. We'll see inflation. Inflation will get a lot worse. We'll see hyperinflation. That will have an effect on all the other countries around the world. Everything will start to fall apart, and we will see a total collapse. Can they let this happen? Can they go down this path? Yeah, they can. But who are we going to blame? The central bank and the governments for letting this happen. This was their policy. They told us everything was fine. And this is why I don't think at this point they're going to let this happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.